Well, to take a closer look at what's behind the persisting gender disparity in the movie industry, I'm joined by Imani Cheers, Assistant Professor at the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, how surprised are you that in 2019 we continue to see so few women behind the cameras in film production, let alone getting the accolades when it comes to awards season?
Absolutely. It's really disheartening that we're still in the same place. It's been stagnant for decades. And despite the fact that there's so much talent, they're unfortunately just not getting the opportunities. And we all know with talent and with the creativity, you need to have that access. And if you don't have that access, then unfortunately, we're just not going to see the number rise.
And we hear a lot of excuses. For a long time, the narrative was that female-led movies or female-directed movies don't sell, but obviously recent studies and ticket sales have really debunked that. So then, why isn't that success translating into more female directors and producers?
I think part of it, and there are a number of reasons behind this, but the number one thing is not having the opportunity. So for a producer in a major Hollywood producer to come back and say, okay, we're going to put $100 million behind a filmmaker, the way Ava DuVernay had that opportunity with A Wrinkle in Time and Disney, those unfortunately come across once in several decades. Ava, of course, has been nominated, as Best Director for a documentary with 13th. That was in 2016. And the reality is that they're not getting the opportunities. They're there, the talent is there, and the reality is there's less than those numbers that we just saw. The sad part is it's sometimes even less than that. 4% has been this number. 4% of women are behind the scenes in these major roles, directors, cinematographers, and producers. And that's abysmal in a field that predominantly should have women in these positions of power. But unfortunately, we just don't see it.
Now let's also talk about the funding campaigns. We're seeing some of these films, tens of millions of dollars going to campaigning. So give us an idea what that money goes towards and how women are impacted by this process.
So a lot of people don't realize that for a film to become nominated to the Oscars, there's a massive, sometimes upwards of several $1 million of a campaign that goes into promoting the film, getting out there, and just making sure that in particular the body who votes are able to see this film. And there's a problem because a lot of times you have this issue where producers and these studios are not putting the money behind directors and behind projects that are female-led, and then therefore they're not getting the opportunity to have their work seen in front of the body who votes. Because the reality is it's not popularity, right, from the general public of who's going and just supporting these films in theaters, but the reality is this is why you can have smaller films that might not have had large theatrical releases, right? Roma is a prime example, not female directed, but it's a great example of a film that didn't have a large theatrical release and is still nominated for the most Oscars this year. So the reality is that it takes a lot of money to push these projects, and unfortunately at this moment we're not seeing that money be put behind female directors. I will say with Time's Up, which is a campaign right now in the industry to focus on and to make sure that there are women in these positions of power, whether it be, again, as in directors in particular, cinematographers, and really pushing that. And there's been a campaign to say that these really big-name stars, so that's what it's going to take. Big-name stars saying, I'm not going to do this project unless there are women in these positions of power.
And you raise an interesting point. I mean, should it be on the production houses, the fans, these A-list celebrities who have this power? Who should that onus fall on to get more women into these roles?
I think it's a combination. So the public can sort of demand, we saw that with Oscars So White, for example, that campaign that happened several years ago where it was this push to say, wait a minute, why are we not seeing people of color represented in the nominations? And then there was a moment where they said, okay, we need to look at who votes, right? Who are the people in this governing body? And they switched things up. They added more people of color, more women to the voting blocks. But I think it's going to be a combination of studio heads, the people with the power, the people whose names the general public does not know, saying, okay, we're going to make it a valiant and a dedicated effort to bringing women in every single level, every position behind the scenes, and making sure that these stories and voices are heard. There are a series of different programs that women can join in the field who can get their stories and voices heard, but until we get the money behind those, you're not going to be able to open them up for more opportunities.
Now let's also talk about the pipeline from film school to feature film. It seems like there's a lot more women in film school, and then something seems to happen between that point and really making it big. What's happening there, and how can we change that?
Absolutely. So a lot of the times it's access, and that's what I mentioned. It's not about having the talent or the creativity or the wherewithal to be in these positions of power creatively. But the sad part is that it is so challenging. It is so much money that has to go into it. There are a lot of these projects, and when women don't get the opportunity, I love to draw a point to someone like a Ava DuVernay, who has taken her status in the industry, whether it be with film or with television, and she makes it a point to say, I am going to hire, for example, in her television series, Queen Sugar, I'm only going to hire female directors. I'm going to make sure across the board, across ethnicity and race, I am going to make sure that female directors. And then from that, now these women have on their resumes, right, that they have an opportunity, and then the doors are wide open for them, and then they're getting opportunities. And it's going to take time for us, right? People who are going to, in these positions, who say, we're going to make sure we hire women, we're going to bring women into these conversations. And until we see that happening, I think we're going to keep these numbers at this stagnant point. I'm hopeful as we move forward. There's so many creative stories out there to be told. We know that women can pull in money at the box office, right? We saw it with Girls Trip, you know, and they're working on Girls Trip 2, which is really exciting. So we know it can happen. We just need to see it more deliberate and ideally now. Time's up.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your insights. Imani Cheers there, Assistant Professor at the School of Media and Public Affairs for George Washington University.